Your streak is at 47 days. You almost missed it. 3 minutes before midnight, phone already in your hand, thumb moving before your brain finished waking up. You did not decide to check it. You just did. That small orange number in the corner of the app moved you faster than any real deadline ever has this week. You call it a habit. You believe you built it yourself, one tap at a time, out of nothing but your own discipline. It was not built to be a habit. It was built to be a threat. Somewhere inside a product meeting, years ago, a small team looked at a simple question. Not how do we reward people for coming back tomorrow. A different question, quieter and colder. How do we make people afraid of what happens if they do not? Because rewards are optional. You can walk away from a reward and feel fine. Threats are not optional. Something in you refuses to just let them sit there. Think about the last time you protected something you already had, compared to the last time you worked hard to get something brand new. Which one pulled at you harder? Which one kept you up later, phone in hand, just to be safe, just to check one more time? If you are honest with yourself, protecting the thing you already possessed felt more urgent than chasing something you did not have yet. That is not a quirk of your personality. That is a documented, measurable feature of how the human brain values loss compared to gain. And somewhere, long before you ever opened that app, a designer already knew that about you. So what if the number climbing upward was never really the reward at all? What if it was the leash, disguised as a scoreboard? That is where this gets uncomfortable, because once you see the actual mechanism sitting underneath it, you cannot easily unsee it the next time it is in your own hand. In 1979, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published a paper called Prospect Theory, work that would eventually reshape entire industries far beyond academic economics. Their central finding was simple to state and strange to actually live inside. Losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. Losing $20 stings more than finding $20 ever delights you. This asymmetry now has a name inside behavioral science. Loss aversion. For decades, that finding mostly sat inside academic journals and university lecture halls, cited by economists, largely unknown outside them. Then Silicon Valley found it, and Silicon Valley does not leave good research sitting on a shelf. At Stanford, researcher B.J. Fogg spent years studying what made small daily behaviors repeat automatically, running experiments inside what became known as the Persuasive Technology Lab. Fogg's models on behavior triggers were later studied directly by early product designers at Facebook and Instagram, some of whom sat in his classroom before ever writing a line of production code. But loss aversion, on its own, is only a finding. It needed a specific mechanic to become an actual product feature. It needed something a person could build, something that could visibly break, something a user could watch and worry about in real time. In 2015, Snapchat shipped a small yellow flame icon that appeared next to a friend's name. The streak. 2 users sending photos back and forth every single day, a counter climbing higher with no visible ceiling. Snapchat's own public messaging around the feature emphasized connection and consistency between friends. But underneath that framing, the design does something loss aversion research predicts with unsettling precision. A counter that only climbs upward does not feel urgent on its own. A counter that can vanish overnight does. Researchers Nunes and Xavier Drèze had already documented a closely related effect years earlier, in a 2006 study describing what they named the endowed progress effect. Give someone partial credit toward a goal they did not personally earn, and they will fight harder to protect that head start than someone starting from true zero ever would. A number simply handed to you, even one you never chose or asked for, starts to feel like property the moment it exists in front of you. And losing property, unlike missing an opportunity, feels closer to theft. Put those two findings together, and what you get is no longer a game. It is a countdown wearing the costume of a reward. There is a third piece worth naming, because it explains why the panic hits exactly when it does. Behavioral researchers studying deadline pressure have long noted that urgency does not build gradually. It stays flat, almost invisible, until the very end of a window, then spikes sharply in the final moments before that window closes. That is why you do not think about your streak at noon. You think about it at 11:57 p.m., heart rate slightly elevated, over a photo you do not even care about. The app did not need to remind you constantly. It only needed to make sure the ending felt close enough to hurt. But here is the dark turn. Internal design documentation later reported from inside several major platforms described streak-style mechanics explicitly as retention tools, not engagement tools, in the language used by the teams that built them. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Engagement asks you to want to come back. Retention does not actually require you to want anything at all. It only requires you to fear the alternative more than you resent the app itself. Teenagers, in particular, have reported feeling obligated to maintain streaks with friends they had already grown distant from, sometimes handing over their own passwords so someone else could log in on their behalf during a vacation, an illness, or a period of grief. The friendship, in some of these cases, had already quietly ended. The number had not. And the number was the thing still demanding daily attention. Some apps went further, turning the fear itself into a purchase. Duolingo, founded by Luis von Ahn, built its own streak system on nearly identical logic, and eventually introduced a paid streak freeze, letting users buy protection against the very anxiety the feature was designed to produce in the first place. The company was not simply selling language lessons anymore. It was selling relief from a threat it had built into the product on purpose. This was never really a story about willpower. Willpower was never the variable actually being tested here. The systems were tested directly against loss, and loss won, consistently, because loss aversion is not a personal character flaw unique to distracted or weak-willed people. It is a documented, near-universal feature of how the human brain is wired to protect whatever it already believes it owns. The designers did not need to understand you personally, your habits, your history, or your specific weaknesses. They needed a paper from 1979, a number that could climb, and a way to make that number capable of hitting zero. Look at your own week, honestly, for a moment. Count the small numbers you protect without ever asking why. A streak. A follower count. A step total. An unread badge you clear out of instinct rather than curiosity. None of these were placed in front of you by accident, and none of them were designed primarily to make you happy. They were designed to make disappearing feel worse than staying ever did. So the streak was never really measuring your consistency at all. It was measuring how much quiet fear a small number could hold before you finally noticed it was there, sitting in the corner of your screen, doing its job. Every single time you have opened an app you did not particularly want to open, just to protect a count you barely think about, you were not being weak or undisciplined. You were behaving exactly the way decades of behavioral research already predicted a human being would behave, under exactly those conditions, on purpose. Right now, somewhere on your phone, a number is quietly waiting to reset at midnight. It does not know your name. It does not remember why you started it, or whether you even remember yourself anymore. It only knows one function, precisely, how to end. And that, far more than any reward it has ever actually given you, is the real reason you keep coming back tonight.